right, so get ready for this deep dive because we're going somewhere today that most people don't even think to look. It's immigration and your online life. We're looking specifically at excerpts from a guide for immigration lawyers, and it's all about the new USCIS social media policy.
Right.
You know, that little box you probably check without thinking.
Yeah.
Turns out it's a bigger deal than most people realize.
It is. It really is. And what's so fascinating here is how USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the folks that handle like visas and green cards and all that, they're going beyond just your application now. They're actually digging into social media to vet applicants.
I mean, so they're like scrolling through my old tweets. How is that even legal?
Yeah. So the guide explains that they're collecting what they call social media identifiers.
Okay.
So basically usernames for platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, even LinkedIn.
Wow.
And they frame it as a national security measure, saying that, it helps identify potential threats and helps verify identities.
Okay, but that still feels kind of creepy, right? Like, what exactly are they looking for?
Well, the guide actually gets pretty specific about this.
Really?
It suggests that USCIS is using this data to look for patterns, things like hate speech or potential ties to extremist groups, or even just inconsistencies between what you say online and what you're telling them on your application.
So it's not just about having like a squeaky clean profile.
Yeah.
It's also about making sure your online life matches up with what you're telling them.
Exactly. And that's where it gets kind of tricky for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Think about it. How much of what we post online is truly a reflection of who we are?
Yeah.
We use social media to vent or to joke, to experiment with different personas.
I know. I wouldn't want them judging me based on some sarcastic comment I made like 5 years ago.
Right.
What are people supposed to do? Like delete their entire internet history?
Well, the guide actually offers some surprisingly practical tips.
Okay.
It really emphasizes the importance of privacy reviews.
Okay.
So going through your accounts and adjusting the settings so only your public content is accessible.
Yeah.
They even suggest like deactivating or editing certain accounts, especially if they contain, potentially sensitive material.
So basically treat your online presence like a job interview?
That's a great analogy, yeah.
Okay.
The guide also stresses the importance of professionalism.
Okay.
So presenting like a consistent positive image across all of your platforms.
Right.
And it reminds applicants that even if a post is technically private, it can still be subpoenaed or accessed under certain circumstances.
This is a lot to take in.
Yeah.
What stands out to you as the biggest takeaway so far from all this?
I think the most important thing is to just be aware.
Yeah.
Most people just aren't thinking about how their online life could impact their immigration journey.
Right.
But, as this policy shows, the lines are getting more and more blurred.
It really makes you wonder what this means for the future.
Yeah.
If they're doing this with immigration, what's next?
That's a question a lot of people are asking, and it's something we'll be exploring further later in this deep dive.
Good.
But for now, let's stay focused on the practicalities.
Okay.
The guide also highlights some key concerns that a lot of applicants might have.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right.
What are people most worried about?
Well, the big one is misinterpretation.
Okay.
Think about it. Like sarcasm and humor, even cultural differences, can easily get lost in translation online.
Right.
What might seem harmless to you could be flagged as a red flag by an algorithm or a reviewer who doesn't understand the context.
Oh, man, that's scary.
Right.
What if they misinterpret like an inside joke or something?
Exactly. And then there's the issue of scope.
Yeah.
How far back are they going to look? Are they going to judge you based on something you posted when you were a teenager?
Oh, I would not want them seeing my angsty MySpace phase photos.
Right.
That's like, are we never allowed to evolve or change our minds?
That's a valid point, and it brings up another concern, which is the potential for false positives.
Yeah.
What happens if you get flagged for something you didn't even post?
Oh.
Like if someone else uses your name or your photo.
Whoa, that's like a nightmare scenario.
It is.
So what happens if someone does get flagged? Like, are they automatically disqualified?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
The guide outlines a process for, responding to concerns and providing context.
Okay.
But it also underscores the importance of legal counsel.
So this is where having a good immigration lawyer can really make a difference.
Absolutely. They can help you navigate the complexities of the system and advocate on your behalf and potentially even challenge decisions that are based on social media activity.
Okay, so let's say I'm like in the process of applying for a visa or green card.
Okay.
What's the first thing I should do?
Well, the guide suggests starting with a very thorough review of your online presence.
Okay.
Think of it as like a digital spring cleaning.
Okay.
Go through each platform, adjust your privacy settings, and really scrutinize any publicly available content.
So basically, pretend like USCIS is your new BFF and curate accordingly.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
And don't just focus on the obvious stuff, like, political rants or questionable photos.
Right.
Think about anything that could be misconstrued or taken out of context.
So even something as simple as like a comment on a controversial news article could potentially raise a red flag.
It's better to be safe than sorry.
Right.
The guide really emphasizes the importance of presenting like a neutral or positive image, especially when it comes to sensitive topics.
Okay, I'm definitely feeling the need to go through my social media with a fine-tooth comb after all this.
Yeah.
But what about the delays we talked about earlier? How this whole social media vetting could slow down the application process?
Right.
How much of a difference does it really make?
It's hard to say for sure because it really depends on individual cases and the complexity of the review.
Right.
But the guide does caution applicants to be prepared for potential delays.
Okay.
Especially if their social media activity requires like further scrutiny.
So it's like adding another layer of bureaucracy to an already very bureaucratic process.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay.
And that's why staying informed and being proactive is so crucial.
Okay. I'm starting to see a pattern here. Knowledge is power.
Yes.
Preparation is key.
Right.
And when in doubt, call a lawyer.
You got it.
Okay.
But remember, this isn't just about like ticking boxes and following rules.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the bigger picture.
Okay. I'm all ears. What's the bigger picture here?
The bigger picture is that our online and offline lives are becoming increasingly intertwined.
Okay.
What we do online has real-world consequences, and we need to be mindful of that.
So it's not just about getting a visa or a green card anymore. It's about how we present ourselves in this digital age.
Exactly. And that raises some big questions about, fairness and privacy and the role of technology in our lives.
Questions we'll definitely be diving into.
Yeah.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's go back to the guide for a minute.
Okay.
Is there anything else in there that you think our listeners should know?
There is one more point that I think is particularly interesting.
Okay, lay it on me.
All right, so the guide highlights a specific case study where an applicant was flagged for social media activity that was later deemed to be satire.
Whoa, hold on.
Yeah.
So someone was almost denied entry because of a joke.
It almost happened.
Oh my gosh.
Fortunately, they had legal representation and were able to provide context and prove that the posts in question were intended to be humorous.
That's crazy.
It is.
It just goes to show how easily things can be misconstrued online.
Yeah.
But it also highlights the importance of being able to defend yourself and your online activity.
Exactly. And that's why we need to be having these conversations and raising awareness and making sure people understand the potential risks and implications.
All right. I think we've laid some solid groundwork here.
Uh-huh.
We've talked about what the new USCIS social media policy and the practical steps that people can take to protect themselves.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the why. Why is this happening now? What's driving this shift towards increased scrutiny of our online lives?
That's a great question. And to answer it, we need to understand the broader context. So the shift towards increased scrutiny of our online lives is driven by like a really complex interplay of factors.
Right.
One key element, I think, is just like the evolving nature of security threats in a digital age.
Okay, so we're talking terrorism, cyber attacks, that kind of thing.
Exactly. As traditional borders become more porous in like the digital realm, governments are increasingly looking for ways to assess risk and identify potential threats before they even reach physical borders.
It's like they're trying to build a digital wall to match the physical one.
That's a good analogy, yeah.
Okay.
They're trying to like extend their security apparatus into the online world where a lot of activity is happening that's beyond their traditional reach.
But how effective is that really? Can you really judge someone's character or intentions based on their social media posts?
That's a huge question.
Yeah.
And it kind of leads us to like another driving factor here,
Right.
which is the increasing availability and sophistication of data analysis tools.
So we're talking AI algorithms, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And the guide actually mentions some of the technologies that are being employed.
Oh, wow.
It talks about natural language processing and sentiment analysis, even facial recognition being used to scan social media data and flag potential red flags.
Wait, facial recognition, how does that even work with social media?
Well, think about all the photos that we post online.
Right.
These algorithms can analyze those images, identify individuals, and potentially even track their movements and associations.
Wow.
It's all about connecting the dots and building like a really comprehensive profile.
Wow, it's like something out of a sci-fi movie.
It is.
But also kind of scary.
Yeah.
How do we even know that these tools are being used responsibly?
That's the million-dollar question, and it brings us to another key factor that's driving this whole shift.
Okay.
Which is the growing public acceptance of surveillance.
What do you mean by that?
Well, just think about how much data we willingly share online.
Yeah.
Our locations, our preferences, even our thoughts and feelings.
Right.
In many ways, we've become accustomed to a level of surveillance that would have been unthinkable like a generation ago.
It's true. We're constantly being tracked by our phones and our apps and our smart devices.
Right.
It's almost like we've traded privacy for convenience.
And that's a trade-off that governments are increasingly exploiting.
Yeah.
As we become more comfortable with sharing our lives online, they're finding new ways to collect and analyze that data for their own purposes.
So it's not just about immigration anymore. It's about this broader trend of governments using technology to like monitor and control their citizens.
That's a valid point, and it's something we really need to be mindful of as we move forward, because as technology continues to evolve, so too will the ways in which it can be used for surveillance and control.
It's kind of overwhelming to think about.
Yeah.
Like, are we just pawns in some giant data game?
I understand how you feel. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of all these technological advancements.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that we still have agency.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we can choose how we engage with technology.
Right.
We can educate ourselves about the risks and implications, and we can advocate for policies that protect our privacy and our civil liberties.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There's still hope.
Absolutely. The future is not predetermined.
Okay.
We have a role to play in shaping it.
Okay. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
But let's get back to the specifics of this social media policy for a second.
Okay.
We've talked about like the why, but what about the how? How are these algorithms actually working?
Right.
What are their limitations?
That's a great question, and it's one that the guide unfortunately doesn't delve into in great detail.
Okay.
But what it does say is that these algorithms are constantly evolving.
Evolving in what way?
Well, they're being fed more data all the time. And as they process that data, they're learning and adapting and becoming more sophisticated in their ability to identify patterns and make predictions.
So they're getting smarter.
In a way.
But doesn't that also mean that they're getting more prone to bias?
That's a valid concern. If these algorithms are trained on biased data sets, they're going to perpetuate and amplify those biases in their analysis.
So if the data set is already skewed towards flagging certain groups or types of behavior,
Right.
the algorithm is just going to reinforce those biases.
Exactly. And that's why transparency and oversight are so crucial.
Okay.
We need to be able to understand how these algorithms are working, what data they're being trained on, and what steps are being taken to mitigate bias.
So it's not enough to just trust that the technology is doing its job.
Right.
We need to be able to look under the hood and make sure things are running fairly.
Absolutely. And that requires a combination of technical expertise and legal frameworks and public awareness.
Okay, so let's say I'm like a tech-savvy individual who's also really concerned about privacy. What are some things that I can do to protect myself in this digital age?
Well, the guide offers some practical tips, but I think it's important to go beyond the basics.
Okay.
One thing you can do is use privacy-enhancing tools like VPNs and encrypted messaging apps.
So basically make it harder for them to track my online activity.
Exactly. You can also be more selective about the information that you share online.
Okay.
Think twice before posting personal details or political opinions or anything that could be used to identify or profile you.
So like maybe skip the what's your Hogwarts house quizzes.
Probably a good idea. And finally, stay informed about your rights and the latest developments in privacy law.
So knowledge is power, as they say.
Absolutely. The more you know about the rules of the game, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself.
Okay, I'm starting to feel a little more empowered.
Good.
But what about the bigger picture?
Yeah.
We've talked about all the potential risks of this technology, but are there any potential benefits?
So that's an excellent question, and it's one that often gets overlooked in the debate. Because while there are certainly valid concerns about privacy and surveillance, there's also the potential for this technology to be used for good.
Yeah, so like what if this actually leads to more honesty online? You know, if people know that their social media could be reviewed, they might be less likely to post things that are misleading or outright false.
So it's like a self-regulating system.
Right.
People are more careful about what they post because they know someone might be checking.
Exactly. It could incentivize people to be more thoughtful about their online personas and to present a more authentic version of themselves.
That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
Instead of seeing social media as a place to like hide behind a mask, we could start using it as a way to like build genuine connections and showcase our true selves.
Right. And think about the potential for accountability.
Okay.
If someone is spreading harmful misinformation or engaging in online harassment, their social media activity could be used to hold them responsible for their actions.
So it's like a deterrent.
People might think twice before posting something hateful or discriminatory if they know it could come back to bite them.
Exactly. It could help to create a more civil and respectful online environment.
Okay, I'm seeing the potential here.
Yeah.
But what about the concerns that we talked about earlier, like bias and misinterpretation?
Right.
How do we make sure these tools are being used fairly and ethically?
That's the crucial part. It all comes down to transparency and oversight.
Okay.
We need to know what data is being collected, how it's being analyzed, and what safeguards are in place to prevent bias and protect privacy.
So it's not enough to just have the technology.
Right.
We need to have the right policies and procedures in place to make sure it's being used responsibly.
Exactly. And we need to have like open and honest conversations about the ethical implications of these technologies.
Conversations like the one we're having right now.
Exactly. The more we talk about these issues, the better equipped we'll be to navigate the challenges and opportunities of this digital age.
Well, this has certainly been a thought-provoking deep dive.
It has.
We started out talking about immigration, but we've really gone down the rabbit hole of the broader implications of social media and technology in our lives.
It's all connected, and as we've seen, the lines between our online and offline worlds are becoming increasingly blurred.
I don't know about you, but I'm definitely going to be thinking twice about what I post online from now on.
It's a good reminder that our digital footprints have real-world consequences.
Well said. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is to just be aware.
Okay.
Be aware of the ways in which your online activity can be collected and analyzed.
Yeah.
Be aware of the potential risks and benefits. And be aware of your rights and the resources available to protect your privacy.
Awareness is key.
Yes.
Knowledge is power. And when in doubt, call a lawyer.
You got.
All right, that's a great note to end on. A huge thank you to our expert for guiding us through this complex and fascinating topic. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.